welcome to Gay Liberation Network's live call-in show on CAN-TV. We are with Gay Liberation Network, a direct action organization based around the LGBTQ and I community here in Chicago and Cook County. And this evening we have a special discussion on transsexual identity and the scientific support for that identity, as well as some changes that are needed within our psychiatric community to recognize that identity. And with us we have Dr. Veronica Drantz, a biologist and physiologist here in the Chicago area. Before we get started on this topic, we have an announcement about our, we are a direct action group, and our next event that we have coming up shortly is a protest of a performer at the House of Blues right here in downtown Chicago on Thursday, October 1st. Please hold the date. There's a Jamaican performer that the House of Blues has booked that advocates the killing of gays and lesbians, and as part of murder music. You can call the House of Blues to register your complaint of this performance. On your screen there, the number's 312-923-2000, and you can also get more information about this on our website at www.gayliberationnetwork.net. Sorry, gayliberation.net. So again, that's www.gayliberation.net. It's right behind my shoulder here. So, as I mentioned earlier, we're discussing this topic of transsexual identity, which many people in the LGBT community may wonder, what's there to advocate about this. But our group of people in this society have, for decades, millennia probably, been referred to as sick. And the American Psychiatric Association has a book that helps guide them in their presentation of what their group thought is to the world. And up until 1973, homosexuality was considered a pathological illness that should not be celebrated within the psychiatric community, but rather should be cured. And still to this day, transsexual identity is recognized as a pathological illness that should be cured, and effectively categorizing people as crazy. So with that introduction, we have Dr. Veronica Drantz to tell us a little bit more about what the problem is. What is the problem?
Well, first of all, should we define for the audience what we are saying a transsexual is?
Sure.
Okay. A transsexual person is somebody who has conventional chromosomes and conventional bodily anatomy and physiology, but feels from very early on a strong and persistent sexual identity of the other sex.
Okay. And this is, even though their body is, physically they are one sex, but they identify themselves as the opposite. Okay. Tell us what the problem is with what's going on in the American psychiatric community. There's this. Tell us more about this manual.
Okay. Well, first of all, the manual is called the DSM, and DSM stands for Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And this is basically the Bible of the American Psychiatric Association, which publishes this book. And it's the standard classification of mental disorders used by psychiatrists and other mental health professionals across the United States. And it's very important because it's, as I said, used by psychiatrists across the United States, but also other mental health professionals, other medical doctors, psychologists, nurses, social workers, occupational and rehabilitation therapists, counselors, and in addition, and importantly for this particular subject, other institutions also consult the DSM, researchers, psychiatric drug regulation agencies, and importantly for this discussion, health insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, policymakers. And this book is consulted for all sorts of clinical settings, inpatient, outpatient, you name it. And even medical professionals from outside the United States will often consult the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual.
Yeah. And at this point in our politics, it could be having an even greater effect on our culture.
Absolutely.
Because the government and policymakers
Right.
are starting, are going to start covering some more health care.
Well, Brent, the DSM is up for revision. It's slated to be revised during next year. And currently in the DSM, transsexual people are designated as suffering from a GID, gender identity disorder. And the scientific evidence indicates that transsexual people are merely natural variations. They're different. They're not disordered.
Agreed. And most of the folks in the lesbian and gay community, I think, are familiar with being called disordered and by churches and other groups. So we understand the hurtful nature of that.
Now
kind
we've
of
got
language.
hard scientific data
Yeah.
that shows that transsexual people are merely different, not disordered. And I'd like to share that with the audience.
Yeah. What has been learned by science?
Okay, well, over the last 50 or 60 years, there's been a lot of work done on human sexual development. And I see the science as falling into like two parts. One part deals with showing that sexual identity is an actual biological phenomenon and not something that's a social or a cultural construct. It's not something we learn, it's something innate. Okay, we're mammals. And this part of the brain that governs sexual behavior is much the same in all mammals, as far as we can tell.
What part of the brain is that?
A part of the brain called the hypothalamus. So the second part of the research has to do with the brain work that looks at transsexual brains and the brains of other people and compares them.
Would you like to show the slide?
Well, no. First, I'd like to explain about that first part of the research,
Okay.
and which is what prompted me to start reviewing all this science in the first place. Is there such a thing as a sexual identity? Is that a biological phenomenon, or is that a cultural construct? Well, two people have figured largely in this debate, and they are John Money, a psychologist, and Milton Diamond, a biologist. And John Money's theory is often referred to as the psychosexual neutrality at birth theory. And his theory maintained that people come into the world with a brain that's blank sexually, and that they look at their genitalia and they get treated by the world in a certain way, and that's how they eventually figure out who they are sexually. That's how they acquire a male identity or a female identity. That was John Money. Okay. And his theory has prevailed started in the 50s and has prevailed over the 60s, 70s, 80s, and throughout most of the 90s, and would still probably be prevailing if it weren't for Milton Diamond.
And that is the theory that guides what's in the DSM today.
Yeah, basically. It came out of that, in a sense, yes. Milton Diamond, on the other hand, being a biologist, has had a evolutionary perspective, and his view was very different. He was a proponent of the sexuality at birth theory, saying that we come into the world basically as a sexual somebody, that the brain is being organized while our bodies are developing in utero as embryos and as fetuses, just as you're born with genitalia that are developed either as a female or a male or something in between, as in many intersex individuals, but they're developed, okay? And so is the brain. And the brain is probably the most important sexual organ. And so, anyway, Milton Diamond maintained that we do, like other mammals, have an instinctive sense of our sexual selves that we are born with, and basically the evidence has borne that out. And probably the most poignant piece of this story is the David Reimer story, referred to in the medical literature as the John Joan case. David Reimer was an identical twin. He and his brother were born, I believe it was 1972, and he suffered terrible mutilation of his penis in a circumcision accident. His distraught parents went to John Money, who was, of course, the expert at the time, and John Money said, "Oh, no problem. We'll just surgically modify David, who was, as I said, called John Joan in the medical literature, and named Brenda. We'll surgically make him look like a girl," which meant they castrated him, Brent. They took away his testicles, which meant he could never be a biological father. I mean, and then Dr. Money said to the parents, lie to him, tell him he was born a girl, raise him as a girl. When he gets to the right age, we'll simulate a female puberty. We'll start giving him female hormones and so on. And presumably they were monitoring David and his brother both, but John Money was not telling the truth. He was running around the world telling the medical community that Brenda, as they called David, being raised as a girl, was a happy, well-adjusted little girl, very feminine, not like her boyish brother, and was going to be a very happy, well-adjusted woman. And the truth was really something else, Brent. He was a miserable kid, and by the time he was getting pumped full of female hormones, the distress was so bad that the parents broke down and told him the truth. When he heard the truth, everything clicked in his head. He said, and he decided to live as a man. He did the best he could to pull his life together. He went through the surgical and hormonal stuff to try to restore his maleness. He married a woman who already had children, and he adopted them. He really made a heroic effort to put his life together, and it was at this point, during the course of the years, John Money claimed that he had lost track of Brenda. How convenient, because you know what? Milton Diamond was able to find him. Milton Diamond found David, not Brenda. He found this person living as a man. And David had no idea that the John Joan case was I forgot to point out to the audience that this case with identical twins was the perfect experiment that you wouldn't have been able to ethically do on human beings by choice, because we have a pair of identical twins here. That means their nature is the same, but we're raising one as a girl and the other as a boy, so the nurturing is different. Mm-hmm. This was the perfect nature-nurture experiment being done on human beings. And if in fact David had grown up to be a happy Brenda, that would show that John Money's theory was right.
Right.
Okay?
And in this case...
And John Money was telling the world that this was a successful experiment. And, by the way, the medical community was hearing really kind of what it wanted to hear. I mean, this was a good message to the surgeons, because they were being told that they could take, and here's something that was happening that David knew nothing about, thousands and thousands of intersex babies born with ambiguous genitalia were being surgically corrected, because Money's theory said that, you looked at your genitalia and the world treats you a certain way, and that's how you come to your identity. So it was very important that you have typical male genitalia or typical female genitalia. You can't tolerate intersex, even though that's perfectly natural. Right. And intersex animals are all over the place. Okay? There's no place in the world for intersex people. All right. Yeah. And so these intersex babies were being surgically mutilated. They had nothing to say about what was happening to their bodies or their lives. And a lot of times even the parents didn't know. I have personally met people who've had their genitalia modified by a doctor who played God within hours of their birth, and the parents never even knew what was going on. Okay, so this was happening and this was because of Money's theory. And when Milton Diamond found David and told David what was going on, And David realized there were thousands of intersex people who were suffering in much the same way he had suffered. He decided he was going to cooperate with Dr. Diamond and let his story be told to the world. That was the end of Don Money's theory.
We're speaking with Dr. Veronica Drantz, biologist, physiologist, on transsexual identity. This is a live call-in show. Here, the number's on your screen, 312-738-1060. We invite your calls and input. So, in round one, in this, in this case, nature definitely won out over nurture.
It certainly did, and we can say that
theory,
sexual identity is organized in the brain before birth. Sexual identity is biological, it's innate, it's not learned, it's not chosen, and it need not correspond to your bodily anatomy. Okay.
And so, tell us more about what the science.
The rest of the science and the thing that really got me going on this project was the paper that I read back in 1995. That was the first paper looking at transsexual brains and comparing them to other brains. And by this time, we knew that the hypothalamus was a major sexual area of the brain. It controls the pituitary gland, it controls your gonads, it controls your reproductive physiology, and the hypothalamus, physiologists know, is the place in the brain that governs instinctive drives and behaviors. When you're hungry, when you're thirsty, when you're sleepy, that's your hypothalamus talking to you. You're not in charge of this part of your brain, it's in charge of you. So when I saw this paper in 1995, looking at a region in the hypothalamus that has been shown in animals to be absolutely essential in reproductive behavior.
We have a slide here.
And I have a slide to show the audience here. This we're looking at nucleus in the hypothalamus. A nucleus is gray matter area where nerve cells are synapsing with each other. And this particular image is created by testing for the this is a neurotransmitter, VIP, that's made by the nerve endings that are synapsing here in this region of the brain. On the far left, we're looking at the nucleus in a heterosexual man. And next to that, in section B, is a heterosexual woman. Next to that, in section C, is a homosexual man. Ignore those streaks, that's an artifact. You can see that a gay man and a straight man, they look exactly the same in this part of the brain. Okay, showing that sexual orientation is not governed by this area, you know. And then on the far right, look at the far right. That is the brain. That is from the brain of a male to female transsexual person. Compare D with B. Okay. And you know what?
While we've got these slides up on the screen, we've got a caller.
Oh.
So let's go to the call. Ben?
Hello?
Hello, Ben.
Yes. Look, I'd just like to ask one quick question. Could you please give me the definition again of a intersex? And also, what is the purpose of bringing scientific data? I don't know what you want it for, what you need it for. What is the purpose of that? Is it to prove a point?
Yes.
Could you? And I'll hang up and listen.
All right, thank you.
All right, well, the purpose of showing the scientific data is to show that the transsexual people are right about what they say, about how they feel, and that they're not crazy, they're not imagining it, they're not making it up, they're not delusional, this is real, and it's the psychiatrists who are wrong, that transsexual people are simply natural variations. We can explain what's going on in their brain using the same mechanism we can explain for everybody else.
And Ben also asked for a definition of intersex.
Oh boy, that's a toughie because there's so many different kinds of intersex, but what they all have in common is that there's some kind of combination of attributes that we normally think of, some attributes as female and some as male. So they have a combination. Some intersex people have unusual chromosomes like XXY or XY or something like that, and some intersex people have ambiguous genitalia. There's a lot of different kinds of intersex.
Would the term hermaphrodite that has
It's
been
only
historically
one
used?
particular kind and a rare type at that.
Okay.
There are other kinds that are far more common.
Okay. We have
And
another.
intersexuality, by the way, is very common. I think people would be surprised to know. It's roughly about maybe 1 in every 60 people is intersex. And by the way, now that the brain work has been done, it's showing that really transsexual people could be regarded as a special kind of intersex.
Okay. We've got another caller, Jessica.
Hi, I was wondering what the guest recommends doctors should do when they deliver babies that are born with both sex organs.
Well, okay, I don't know exactly what you mean by both sex organs because it's not possible to have both male and female external genitalia at the same time. You only have one set to begin with. It can look like a female or it can look like a male or something in between, okay? The clitoris and the penis come from the same organs. The labia majora and the scrotum come from the same organs. You can't have both at the same time, but you can have something that's sort of intermediate. You can have an organ that it's not clear whether you're looking at a clitoris or a penis, for example. Okay.
So you can get.
And it was those
People with-
children with
some aspect
not
of
all
both
intersex
genitalia.
people have ambiguous genitalia, but the ones who did would be obvious when they're born, and these are the children that the doctors were mutilating, and many of whom were living miserable lives because they'd been given a body that didn't go with their psychic identity.
And what would you advocate as an action that the
These
doctor should
children, like everyone, should have control over their bodies and their lives, and you don't go and surgically modify an infant that has nothing to say about what's being done to it. You let that child grow up. You let that child figure out who that child is. And incidentally, some people have an intersex identity. Many intersex people do, although you don't have to be physically intersex to have an intersex identity. We need to give people a place in the world, no matter how different they are. These are all natural variations that we're talking about. What's artificial is the culture. The culture only offers people two options, two genders. It's important to point out the difference between sex and gender. Sex is biological, gender is cultural. And in our culture, we have a binary gender culture. We only give people two choices. You can be a man or you can be a woman. What if you're born into the world intersex in every way? And I know people like that. We give them no place to be in the world. Everyone has a right to be who they naturally and innately are.
Yeah.
It is our birthright.
We've got a caller, Joe.
I have a question. Those examples of you showing of the brain being mapped, are those done post-mortem?
Yes,
if
they are.
If it is, then it's very inconclusive.
No, not inconclusive.
Yes, it is.
Not at all.
Yes,
and that
it
paper
is.
was a beautiful piece of work. I was so impressed when I saw it. They had like built-in controls to show that this area of the brain is not influenced by fluctuations in hormone levels in adulthood. And that paper was so good, it got published in Nature. That's the most prestigious journal in the world. Very hard to get published in Nature.
Okay.
Plus, that work has been repeated. If we look at the subsequent slides, this is more of the data from that first study. On the far left, you can see all the typical males, then homosexual males, then typical females, and on the far right were the male to female transsexuals. Okay, we're looking there at the volume of this nucleus. In the next slide, which is a second study. That first study was done in 1995. This one was done in the year 2000. And let's see, again, on the upper left-hand corner is a typical male. To the right of that is the typical female. Lower left is a typical homosexual male, and you can see again. And we're looking at this nucleus now using a different endpoint. We're looking at somatostatin, which is the neurotransmitter made by the postsynaptic cells. The first one was looking at the neurotransmitter from the presynaptic cells.
Same cell,
And-
same nucleus.
Same nucleus, correct.
Same nucleus,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, right, exactly. And then in the lower right-hand corner is the male to female brain. And on the next slide, we're looking at these bar graphs, and this is amazing because that dot that I've got the arrow pointing to is showing the size of this nucleus in the one and only brain so far that we've looked at from somebody who's a female to male. and look at the size of this nucleus that we think governs or has something to do with sexual identity. This female to male is right there, smack dab in the middle, with all the rest of the guys.
Yeah, with the typical male, the typical heterosexual
Absolutely.
male.
Yes, yes. And so, what we see here, the science is showing us that transsexual people have atypical brains. They have unusual brains. They're special brains, actually, you know. And it's not true, by the way, that a male to female has a female brain in a male body. The brain isn't totally female. But it is true, and this data shows that they really do, male to female transsexual people, really do have a female sensibility, a female emotional way of processing the world. I didn't get a chance to say that the fibers that we're looking at first, making that VIP, are coming in from the amygdala, which is a very emotional part of the brain, the limbic system. The hypothalamus is a very incredible area of the brain that is responsible for so many life-sustaining things, and it also is intimately interconnected with the limbic system, which is the emotional part of the brain that reaches its highest development in mammals, this ancient limbic system. And we are looking here, this nucleus, at the connection, one of those important connections between the amygdala and the hypothalamus, the emotional brain and the part of the brain that governs sexual feelings.
So if we, your wristwatch might be distracting people, but if you were to look at these 4 different brains, the typical heterosexual male, the homosexual male, the heterosexual female, and the male to female transsexual, overall, how do the brains differ? I mean, are there, like, say, between the male to female, the person who is born
so far it looks
male.
to me like the male to female individual, this part of the brain, the nucleus of the striatum terminalis, and just recently, at the end of last year, another paper showing another difference between transsexuals and non-transsexuals. You know, the word for a non-transsexual is cissexual. CIS is the prefix, is the opposite of trans. Okay. So there's a second part of the brain that we found, and we think that these parts of the brain are part of a network that, when operating together, create this feeling of a sexual identity. Okay, that probably is the same in all mammals, works the same way in all mammals. This is ancient animal instinctive feeling. Mm-hmm. Okay,
and
so in a male to female individual, this work is showing us that those parts of the brain that give you your sexual identity are giving these people a female identity. But when the same researchers looked at other nuclei very close by, also in the hypothalamus and elsewhere in the brain, mm-hmm. what they see is more or less a typical male brain. So what you have in a male to female individual, in my opinion, is a very special brain. A bringing together of attributes that you don't normally see put together. So, for example, here you would have somebody, a male to female individual, with a female sensibility and emotionality, maybe, you know, mm-hmm. but would also have those cognitive skills and the physicality of a typical male. I mean, this is an incredible combination of attributes. This is something to be celebrated, not persecuted.
We've got time for one more call. Paula?
Hi, this is Paula, Northwest Chicago. Well, I just want to put this on an elevation of spiritual integrity. And I just want to say we are androgynous, which means to hold that we are both male and female. Yet, the human cannot conceive of this. And you know what? This appalls me and this surprises me at the same time, because you know what? We have both God and element in our generics. And you know what? I'm not going to say
Paula?
this because you know what?
Thank you, Paula.
I know you're...
So, and this idea of us being androgynous does somewhat fit in with the
well,
intersex,
absolutely. Well, and you know, you got to understand that, we didn't look at people who feel sort of intersex. And if we did, what do you think we're going to find? This is a hypothesis, and someday this experiment will be done. So
I would
what do
say
you think
the whole
we're going
gamut.
Well, I mean, if somebody feels intersex, I would predict that nucleus of a stria terminalis would be intermediate in size between that of a typical woman and a typical male. Okay?
Okay. So give us a summary of what we should know and what we should be advocating in our daily lives here.
Well, the summary is that transsexual people have atypical brain structure, atypical brain function, and that difference corresponds to their felt sexual identity. So what they feel is real. They're not disordered. They're merely different. And difference does not equal disorder. And therefore, the American Psychiatric Association should remove gender identity disorder from the next version of the DSM. It's time to stop stigmatizing people for being different.
Thank you very much, Dr. Veronica Drantz. And you're watching Gay Liberation Network's monthly call-in show. We want to make some announcements about our upcoming event, first of all, which is October 1st, a Thursday evening, a protest of the performer Buju Banton at House of Blues, who advocates killing gays and lesbians. Call and register your complaint to the House of Blues at 312-923-2000. This also will be our memoriam of Matthew Shepard and our annual efforts to raise awareness of anti-gay violence, anti-LGBT violence. Our next Gay Liberation Network meeting is the first Wednesday of every month, just like every month, at 7 p.m. Wednesday, September 2nd, Gerberhart Library, the Granville stop on the Red Line. And our next show here is 6:30 on Friday, September 11th. Please tune in. And remember to check out our website, www.gayliberation.net. So remember, you're not sick, you're beautiful. You're just a little different.
That's right.
And there's lots of other folks out there like you. Do you have any other
No, I love that.
comments?
That's a good ending. Yeah. Yeah, everybody has a right to be who they are naturally and innately. The world, the society needs to make a place for them. And the American Psychiatric Association should be leading the way.
Yeah. And if you feel alone out there, check out our website. Tune in again next month and you'll see others like you. Take care. Thank you for tuning in.